Hello everyone, it's Reese here and thank you for joining me for another monthly film roundup. A video where I go through all the films I've watched in a particular month, offer some thoughts, some little analysis where I can. Um, we leap ahead. And this has been somewhat really of a quieter month for me. I've only watched 9 things for the first time. And on my challenge of sort of the list challenge, 5 of those were from the list. Um, as you see, I've just passed a third of the way through, which I'm happy with. But we keep playing on. So with no further ado, I will sort of run through all the films I've watched. If you want to follow me on the journey, my letterbox link is down on the bottom of the image here, as is my Instagram. So to begin, I went to the cinema to watch the Mario Galaxy film. And this is interesting because if you analyse it as a film, like a narrative-driven film, it's not that good because it's essentially a 90-minute just bunch of set pieces that don't really add up to very much in terms of a cohesive story. But I watched it as a Mario fan, and I was, how old was I? 13 when Galaxy came out, um, and I'm a big Mario fan, and I just loved it. There's so many references and callbacks and pieces of nostalgia and some surprises. One of which Nintendo bizarrely ruined in the pre-film marketing. Um, and really, this is kind of the question of what you want for the film. If you're after some sort of really quite heavy plot-driven thing, or even some lightly plot-driven thing, aside from go and rescue the princess, this will not be up your alley. But if you're a big Mario fan, if you're someone who has played all of the games, and sort of will be delighted when you see a character from Mario Land 2 or from Odyssey or from sort of a whole host of Mario games, or indeed not Mario games, um, this is the one for you. I greatly enjoyed it. I had such fun. I was like a little kid watching it, and you can't ask for much more than that. And the next day, I watched something that was quite a radically different change of tone. So we finally watched 28 years later, The Bone Temple. So the film is kind of a sort of an immediate sequel to 28 years later. Spike has been sort of captured by the Sir Jimmy gang. The leader, Sir Jimmy Crystal, played by Jack O'Connell, sort of meandering through the wilderness, causing trouble and sort of essentially trying to grapple with tensions within his gang. I mean, in the meantime, Ray finds his Dr. Kelson is still in his sort of bone temple, as it were, and has sort of connected with one of the alpha zombies and thinks he may have found some way of getting through to it on a more human level. And then tension emerges when the two groups' paths finally cross. Um, so I was kind of torn on the original 28 Years Later. This one I enjoyed more, and I think this is because really it's a character piece. It's a character piece about two quite different characters. Um, as I say, sort of O'Connell's Sir Jimmy, and Ray Fiennes is Dr. Kelson. Um, and both of them are magnetic. They're really fantastic. Um, the final sort of entire sequence of the film is glorious and so tense and so well acted, um, and I found that really strong. Um, the film is kind of a weird sort of mixed bag in that there were sort of, as a sequel, there are sort of many unanswered questions from the first film. I'm going to sort of give some light spoilers here. If you're going to watch this film, sort of turn your audio off for like the next 30 seconds or so. Sort of the Spike character is near to his home, in no sense attempts to escape, nor does his father come and sort of try and find him. Um, End of spoilers. And then there's sort of a closing sequence, which I am not going to mention again, which I think if you're a major fan of the franchise will give a lot of excitement. It's not something that overly speaks to me, in truth. I enjoyed the film. Am I excited for the third? I don't know. Undertones. So this was an Odeon Scream Unseen, a mystery film about a podcast recorder, in which essentially it's one half skeptic, one half believer. It's very sort of Danny Robbins uncanny. And they're sent 10 mysterious audio files that sort of depict something scary, and so they decide to sort of podcast and listen to them all. This is a film again of sort of mixed bags. So this is a very, very slow burn. Because inexplicably this podcast seems to take about 4 weeks to film, or whatever it is, and there was least efficient podcasters. But there's a general creepiness to it that just really hit me. There's a lot of framing of sort of negative space, where you're sort of waiting for things to appear. And there's sort of the audio recordings. This audio horror really, really got to me. Culminating in sort of a final kind of 15 minutes or so that, as far as I'm concerned, just worked. They just landed. In all honesty, so it's rare that I sort of ever have sort of negative experiences and negative reactions to horror films. This one, I genuinely had a nightmare. Something about the ending just really, really got to me. Often the case, I suppose, that what is unseen is more powerful than what is seen. But this is a very slow burn. As I say, this will not land with everyone. The guy who plays the other podcast host, whose voice is the only one we hear, is not perhaps the most convincing actor in the world, let me say. And yes, no, if you're sort of waiting for stuff to get going, it takes a while. This is a film that's, I think, it's 90 minutes and could really have been a tighter half of that version. It would have sort of landed perhaps more effectively. One to approach your own peril. I think it will be a divisive one. I very much do. So the first of my films of the 1001 list, a film of the German Weimar period, Expressionist period, in which a town, a community is sort of set on edge by the fact that there is a child murderer among them. This is often touted as sort of quite an early horror film, and really it's kind of an early sort of a serial killer film, really. I think it's more in the lens of sort of the police procedural, and we're not overly interested in the killer until they sort of get more, this is Peter Lorre's killer, who gets a more prominent role to do in sort of the third act. This is really about sort of the sort of the police and a criminal contingency who are trying to figure out who this person is. And it's about sort of the ensuing sort of tension and suspicion that grows in a community. This is very tight, very gripping, and there's some very sort of tense sequences here. The sequence in which Law's character is sort of trapped in a building as everyone is trying to get him, which really landed with me. This is, I think, a classic of the sort of German expressionist period, and with good reason. It is, as I say, it's dry in the sense of if you're expecting some sort of serial killer film as it's made out to be, that's perhaps not the way to go in. Unfortunately, I didn't really have those preconceptions, and thus this one landed really, really well. The second one from the list, The Palm Beach Story. So sort of a screwball comedy romance about a couple who sort of have a bicker after the husband, who's sort of like a failed inventor, thinks that his wife is sort of getting cheeky with a sort of rich eccentric billionaire. She leaves, he pursues her, and she encounters one of the richest men in the country, and sort of decides essentially to be with him to kind of get some money for her husband's idea. And the husband comes along and finds her, and sort of there's mixed identities, mixed confusion, and mistaken identities, people not knowing who they are or their relations to each other. Culminating in sort of the final minute in which sort of a twist worthy of someone like Like Shyamalan is dropped. It really is, from out of nowhere. This was fun. This was sort of quite a fun, light romance. The husband I find really quite an unsympathetic character in truth. That there's so much tension about why she wants to go back to him. She's dating this millionaire who dotes over her, and then the husband is a bit of a wet blanket. It's not something I overly saw, but what can you do there? It's quite fun. There are some excellent sequences. I particularly enjoyed them towards the start, where the wife blags away onto a millionaire's train, and then the millionaires behave dreadfully on board. This is a wonderful satire of the rich. You can make the case that sort of when we reach the court of the millionaire as well, it kind of is this sort of massive satire of the rich, and their sort of ability to coast through life, not really knowing what's going on. I'll leave that with you if you see it to see if you agree with me. Um, so these films, I've put them as a double act essentially because they are sort of part of the same story. So this is two documentaries, both of them on my list, by the Nazi filmmaker Riefenstahl, who is tasked by Adolf Hitler to document the Berlin Olympics in 1936. And both documentaries are essentially capturing capturing this event. Sorry, and this is quite a tough one to review. On the sort of the formal level, many of the techniques that were deployed here essentially kind of became the sort of language of the film sport coverage. You could watch the way that the sports are depicted here and recognise it in sport coverage of nowadays. It was really that ahead of its time. But it's hard to say this without sort of acknowledging sort of the iffy politics of the film. The fact that this is a documentary is effectively sort of sports washing the Nazi regime, sort of presenting Berlin to an interior and exterior audience as this kind of sort of bastion of sort of competition and sort of covering up some of the darker political things that are happening at the moment. So where do you land? So this is a film, as I say, it's sort of very important in sports films and sports coverage generally. But to sort of get lost in sort of how impressive the filmmaking is and how sort of engaging the sports action is effectively sort of missing the point that this is sort of essentially papering over, covering up some quite hideous atrocities in the country at the time. The Exiles, another film on my list. So this was a tougher one to watch. A tougher one. So again, when I pass my comments here, I'm in no sense downplaying the historical significance of the film, but this did not land with me at all. So it is a film by a guy called Kent Mackenzie, and essentially there's a bunch of young Native Americans who left reservation life in the 50s, and it's sort of depicting a day in their life in Los Angeles. It's very kind of almost kind of a sort of a slice of life pseudo documentary. It is not a film that, if I'm honest, I found particularly engaging. Sort of there's no sort of narrative content or anything like that. It's very sort of loose and it's realist. It's sort of very almost kind of improvised. And this is not one that landed with me. Although I'm not saying this. I don't want to ignore the film's historical importance, right? Which is essentially how it sort of depicted the Native Americans who had sort of left that lifestyle, but also B, the way it depicted essentially sort of poor areas, sort of films that were sort of set on America's Skid Row, and it really captures that sense of kind of aimlessness and kind of almost kind of a detachment from society by people who were living in these areas. So I don't want to diminish the film. For some people this will really land, and this was not one for me. And then the last film I watched this month was another Scream Unseen, as it happened. Damien McCarthy's Hokum. So I was very much looking forward to this. I'm a big fan of Oddity, a big fan of Caveat, and his previous two films. And this one again landed for me. This was sort of the highlight of the month, I think. So this follows Adam Scott, who's a writer, and he returns to Ireland to scatter his parents' ashes. And he stays at a hotel and learns that the owner has sealed one of the upstairs rooms, believing that there is a witch inside. Later, through circumstances, Adam Scott learns that one of the hotel workers, with whom he was quite friendly with him, has disappeared. He suspects that the woman may have disappeared and gone into that room, and so essentially attempts to find out what happened. I'm going to say nothing more. It's one of these films, like Oddity, like Caveat, that sort of benefits from sort of knowing, sort of the less you know, the better. But this just landed. This is so good. Scott is, I think, this is probably his best ever film performance. And the way McCarthy crafts scares and crafts narrative just works. It just works for me. It lands perfectly. And there's some excellent sequences here where I jumped, where I felt sort of the hairs on my arm stand up. and some excellent narrative shifts as well. As is, if you've seen either of the two previous films, you'll not be surprised by that. Sort of keep sort of the keep the tension up throughout. This is sort of a grand one. It really works. And again, sort of the symbolism, the way that shots are constructed, the way that things like alarm clocks and bells and televisions are framed as terrifying, just really lands with me. This is a style of film I think he's one of the sort of more exciting voices in horror at the moment, and I would very much recommend, if you're a fan of the genre, to go and check out Hokum. And then if you enjoy that, make sure to go check out Oddity and Caveat as well. So this concludes my review of the films of April. So a shorter one than usual because, as I say, I watched fewer things. And I will sort of be back this time next month with another review of the May films and more obscene times. If there's any reviews you'd like me to make in the meantime, any videos that would be useful on the academic front or the film front, please do comment below. I do read all the comments, and I very much want to make the stuff that you guys want to see. Otherwise, make sure to like and make sure to subscribe, and leave comments on what you thought of the video, or indeed what films you've seen this month. Do let me know that too, and ring the bell so you know when there's a new video coming. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching this, and I will look forward to seeing you all in the next one.